Draft Mechanic is a proud member of Punchboard Media. Pull up a chair at punchboardmedia.com. Draft Mechanic, Episode 87.
On this episode of Draft Mechanic, we discuss recent plays of the new Terraforming Mars Digital Edition, Orbis, and the Catapult expansion for Carcassonne.
No!
We've got a 6-pack review of Cryptid, which we're also putting on tap.
Why did we do the Catapult?
We have a beer traveler for our recent trip to Seattle, and we talk about friendly local game stores away from home that really bring the friendly. So sit back, relax, grab a pint, and enjoy the show.
You've seen the future and it works to take the mile. All is for the best in the best of our world.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of Draft Mechanic. I'm Jake.
And I'm Danielle.
And Draft Mechanic is the podcast about board games and craft beer and anything we can do to tie the two together.
Here at Draft Mechanic, we like our beer like we like our board games.
With a dash of mystery.
Mystery is the best way.
Yes, we have Cryptid from Osprey Games, the new game about discovering mysterious monsters using logical deduction. That's just a dash of mystery.
I mean, the timing is correct, too, because isn't Mystery Brewing closing? Didn't we just find that out this week?
That is kind of sad. We can talk about that when we get to beer stuff later. But hey, welcome to Draft Mechanic. If this is your first episode, thank you so much for joining us. If you are a repeat listener, we love having you around, so thank you once again for coming back to this particular episode. You can get in touch with us on the internet, draftmechanic.net, or at draftmechanic on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, all those typical internet places.
We've also got a Board Game Geek Guild. That is guild number 2470, so there will be a thread up for this episode, as there is for every episode. If you have opinions on what we're talking about, or you just want to shoot us a line about something, that is the place to do it.
Also, I'd like to give a quick shout out at the top of the episode to our new Board Game Geek Micro Badgers, those who have picked up the Draft Mechanic Micro Badge. So shout out to Chris Whitpan, Joseph Reisman, Tom Conder, and Brian Rodenbeck. If you would like to get the Draft Mechanic Micro Badge, you can do so, obviously, at Board Game Geek. You can hit up our guild. We've got a thread there pinned, so you can get to the Micro Badge really easily. And also, if you need some Geek Gold for it, we can definitely help you out with that. We have tons upon tons of Geek Gold from supporting BGG and doing all that kind of stuff throughout the years.
If you happen to be in the Charlotte, North Carolina area, we do 2 meetups a month. The first is on the first Thursday of every month. That is November 1st, if you are listening to this right when it came out. Ooh. It is going to be at Good Road Cider Works on the Thursday meetup. It always is. So November 1st, go down to Good Road, get some cider, get some mead, get some non-alcoholic beverages, which they also have. We have a great time there every time. There's lots of great space and lighting and everything. We also do a meetup on the third Tuesday of every month. That is going to be November 20th in November. That is the Tuesday before Thanksgiving. Mm-hmm. So if you are not heading out of town for the holiday, or you're heading into town for the holiday, we would love to play some games with you there as well. That is Salud Cerveceria on the 20th.
I mentioned it briefly last episode, but I want to bring it up again as well. We recorded with Chris Whitpan over at Game All Night for his kind of late night styled talk show. And well, I guess there was a game involved as well, but that episode will be going up between this episode and the next episode of Draft Mechanic will be going up on his YouTube channel Thursday, November 8th. So go ahead and check that out. We'll, of course, post about that on our social media, but you can just go search for Game All Night. That's NITE, and do so, and then you can see it and check out all the other cool ones. Eric Summerer is this week, so you can just listen to those smooth vocal stylings. In the board game world news, obviously we are recording at the end of the Essen Spiel game fair. It's finishing up, I guess, probably probably a few hours ago, since we are in the Eastern time zone and it is 7:40 p.m. on Sunday. They probably finished up a little while ago. But anyway, yeah, Essen Spiel. What were the hot games? I don't know. There's like 1,200 new games that released, so I would wager we're not going to know for a few weeks what the real big hot ones were, but you can obviously go to Board Game Geek or listen to any kind of media from people that went there. I know that there is definitely some people from Punchboard Media that will be posting on punchboardmedia.com over the next few days, so I would just say go check that out. I'm sorry I don't have more Essen news.
Yeah, I was going to say that is some low-key Essen reporting there. Go listen to somebody else.
Essen, it happened. Congratulations.
Sure did. It is a place.
I want to go to Essen so badly. And obviously it's the kind of thing we could do some point in the future, because I feel like, and this kind of ties back to what we talked about with Gen Con, how there weren't huge game releases at Gen Con this year that we were super excited about. But there are so many in that medium to heavy Eurogame category that came out at Essen this weekend that are exactly the kind of stuff that I'm most excited about. And honestly, I've intentionally been staying kind of out of the loop on it because I don't want to see the 200 new awesome games that came out at Essen that I probably want want to try to get to play. A, because I don't want to get 200 new games right now. We're still working through Gen Con stuff from last year or the year before. But at the same time, so many of these games might not make it over here at any time in the near future, and they'll probably just start to trickle out over the next few months. So that's kind of like how I feel about Essen. In a way, I want to look and I want to be there and I want to play these games, but at the same time, they're not going to get over here for a while, so I don't really feel like I need to worry about it too much.
I mean, I think it's worth paying attention to this stuff that is really popular or really well thought of coming out of Essen, because that's likely what we're going to see coming over here eventually.
Yeah.
I mean, stuff like Altiplano that came out in spring here was released at Essen the year before. So you're likely going to get at least a little bit of information as to what we will see if you look at what was hot out of Essen. You'll also get some stuff that comes over a little quicker towards the end of the year or the beginning of next year, and that'll sort of, I mean, from a podcasting perspective, that at least lets us plan where we're going with stuff. But yeah, there's no reason to rush on and try to find a way to get this stuff here or import it, I don't feel like, especially now that Fun and Games isn't doing their muling system because they're not doing online ordering anymore. I feel like the games will get here if they get here, and if they don't, I couldn't handle dealing with 1,200 new games anyway. Like, that's not an influx that we could in any way process. So letting the nature of distribution sort it out a little bit is fine by me.
Yeah. It is kind of a relief in a way how many games there are now, because I no longer feel like, versus 4 or 5 years ago, I felt like I've got to check out that new thing, because there were only so many really high profile or super interesting games to come out. But I feel the bar has been raised so high that the stuff that was super amazing a few years ago would be kind of mid-level or par for the course right now. I don't know. I mean, maybe that is true. Maybe it's not. Maybe it's just, aging perspectives in terms of we've been podcasting for over 3 years now, so we're looking at it with a much different lens than we used to. But I, for one, I'm not going to freak out about Essen. I'm really excited to play the games if and when they get here.
One of the other things that sort of helps along with this is just the way that a lot of distribution is being shared. Like, we were recently in a game store, and we're going to talk about the game store that we were in a little bit later in our final round, but I was looking through the shelves, and one of the less distributed board and dice releases that we had known about, because we talked with the board and dice guys when we were getting some of the Multi-Universum and Pocket Mars stuff done, was over in the US, and I would imagine that is because they are forming a lot of strategic partnerships. I know they're working with Grey Fox, and I think they are also working with some other companies as well. I could be wrong on that. But some of these smaller companies that may not necessarily have the distribution legs to reach America on their own are partnering with US companies, and I think that is also going to help us get a lot more of those really good games that are well thought of eventually coming over here.
Well, with what I did actually see from Essen, it looks like we are in for an interesting 6 to 12 months of games coming out of all the stuff that does make it over here, and I, for one, am excited to play all of the board games pretty much ever. Yeah?
Sure.
Time to move on. Let's talk about the Kickstarters. Danielle, you got the updates from last episode?
Sure. We talked about Loveless and Babbage, which is coming from Artana Games. This finished with $95,000 of its $5,000 goal, so well funded.
Very nice.
They earned 8 stretch goals, including wooden tokens instead of punchboard.
Yeah.
We also talked about Dreams of Tomorrow. We had a full Kickstarter preview of that, and it is actually still up, so if you are interested in finding out about Dreams of Tomorrow, you can go back and listen to last episode, get our full Kickstarter preview with playthrough and all of that. That is from Weird Giraffe Games, and they are currently funding at 142% of their goal, $13,000 of their $9,000 goal. It ends on Thursday, November 8th, so the same day that Game All Night with us comes out is the day that this Kickstarter ends. You can multi-mark your calendar, I guess. They have already earned improved card quality, and they are close to a mini expansion stretch goal. So if you are wanting that mini expansion, go out and back the Kickstarter so you can get it.
Okay, I've got 2 new projects for this episode. First, I want to talk about Spirit Island, the Jagged Earth expansion. This is coming from Greater Than Games. It's currently obviously in process. It's funded at almost 12,000%, $579,000 of the $49,000 goal. This is ending on Friday, November 16th. You can back the expansion itself for $59, or get the base box in the first expansion for $175, or for $299. You can get the expansion, the base box, the first mini expansion, a playmat, a broken token insert, and some premium tokens. Now, this has an estimated delivery of May, wait for it, 2020. I think that is the first time that we've reported something in the year 2020 on the Kickstarter segment. Probably. We had a few Decembers and Novembers. But anyway. So,
oh, no.
What?
Seventh Continent.
Seventh Continent. No, that just is delivering in 2020 at this point. Womp womp. We're supposed to get it middle of next year.
Oh, okay.
But anyway, back to Spirit Island Jagged Earth. So this is the first major expansion to the big hit cooperative Spirit Island that came out, I guess, last year by R. Eric Roos. This increases the play count up to 6 from the 4 in the base box. It includes 2 new island boards for massive setups for 5 or 6 players. And it also has 8 new spirits and 2 new adversaries and 2 new scenarios, basically a whole ton of stuff. Danielle, how do you feel knowing that this expansion makes Spirit Island massive and big?
Sort of sad that I didn't love Spirit Island as much as I wanted to. And that might be on me. I know the guys over at Boards Alive absolutely love this game. I know our friend Danielle, who has another copy in our group, absolutely loves this game. It just, for some reason, didn't click with me. But it is, I can see how it is an excellent game, and if it is something that you were really excited about, this looks like an excellent expansion. But I don't know, I can't jive with it. That might just be me.
I understand your feeling on that, and we kind of never really talked about or reviewed this game, so I feel like this might be a good time to actually talk about it. We've played a few games of it with Daniel, and it is a really heavy and complex cooperative game, which is a space you don't usually see. Usually when you see a heavy game, you are doing something like, a Vital Lacerda game where you're working on your personal engine and you're developing your stuff together. And I think what makes a heavy cooperative game difficult is that you don't have to be just concerned with your piece, but you've got to be concerned with everybody's pieces, and you have to work together in such a way that everybody has to jive in one giant engine. And I feel like that's the real stepping stone for Spirit Island, for people that love that and really love to, coordinate and talk a lot and kind of, rationalize stuff out like that. I understand why people really enjoy this. But for us, it really kind of got to the point where we're all just like, this is a lot of stuff for us to work out. And I personally, I would kind of just be in my space over on, my side of the island. I'm just like, well, I can do this. This is all that I can see, because I just wasn't really feeling capable of seeing you and Daniel's pieces of stuff coming in and how it interacts with my engine. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, what we're saying is Spirit Island, it's not you, it's us. I really want to say that I'm excited to see this. I mean, just the art and the ideas for the new expansion make me excited. I mean, you had pointed out one of the spirits. I forget the name of it.
The birds thing? Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's Many Minds Move as One.
And it is this art piece that is a whole flock of birds that form a face, and this is the bird spirit of the island, which seems really cool because they do a great job of making the spirits feel like what they are supposed to be. Mm-hmm. The rushing river spirit feels like a rushing river with the actions that you have and everything like that. So I'm curious to see how they bring these new, really awesome spirits into the game. Mm-hmm. I want to watch somebody else play this game.
I'm kind of at the point where I would like to play it again, and it's one of those things that I wonder if I spent enough time getting into it, would I start to really feel the way that it gels? But at the same time, that's the thing that's really frustrating about the way that we kind of have to play games as, constantly reviewing, is that I don't have the time to invest in Spirit Island that I want. And I know that's kind of a bummer to both you, the listener, who wanted to hear us talk about Spirit Island at some point, probably the one or two of you out there. I'm very sorry. But at the same time, it's a cool game, and if you have enjoyed it, this expansion looks like it's got everything you want.
I do want to say, if you don't know anything about Spirit Island and you would like a really good in-depth rundown of it, that Boards Alive review, which I'm going to say is from July of last year, I'm going to guess, is an amazing, really, really thorough, really in-depth rundown. They talk about all kinds of stuff, and they really did get to the point where they understood the game and could get into it. So if you are looking to learn more about this game before you decide whether or not you want to back the expansion, I would highly suggest going to listen to that.
Yeah,
come back here.
Check that out. Come right back. Alrighty, well, that is the Spirit Island Jagged Earth expansion. You have till Friday, November 16th to check that one out. Second on the list, I have Barrage. This is coming from Cranio Creations. It's currently funding at 900%. That's $242,000 of the $27,000 goal. Ending on Wednesday, November 14th. You can back Barrage for $67 for the core box, $90 to include an expansion, and $113 for both the base game and expansion, and a really neat-looking three-dimensional board. And that will come in just a second. It's not nearly as three-dimensional as you think it is. It's just kind of like tiers of, valleys and stuff.
Oh.
Anyway, so this game, estimated delivery of April 2019, and Cranio apparently is good to deliver on that. They are going to start production as soon as the game funds, and they are going to deliver it to backers 6 months before the retail release, which is pretty bold, honestly, to be able to say that. And if they can get it done, that's a heck of a lead time.
So 4 months?
Yeah, I mean, still. So this is a heavy resource management Euro game from the designers of Lorenzo Il Magnifico, a game that was all over the hotness last year. Or was that this year? That was this year, wasn't it? Oh gosh, this is a long, long year. Anyway, you are investors trying to harness the power of water in a post-coal society using dams and converters to generate energy. This game also has a kind of a neat production wheel mechanic where your resources aren't spent, but they're tied up in production. And didn't expect to mention this twice in the Kickstarter segment, but you can check out a really cool instruction video on this game from Aaron from Boards Alive. It's over on the Shut Up and Sit Down channel. He did a video at Shucks about it. So that is 2 for 2 Boards Alive kind of connections in our Kickstarter stuff. I don't know. Congratulations, Canada. You did it. Haha. So this game drew my eye because of this production wheel mechanic. You have your player board, and kind of Terra Mystica style, you're going to be building buildings off of your player board onto the big central map to create dams and control the flow of water, generate energy, yada, yada, yada. But the thing that it does, it has this kind of like 6 pie-shaped wheel on the side of your board.
I'm sorry, it's shaped like 6 pies?
6 pies. No, it's 6 pie slice. It's like a circle cut into 6.
Like the Trivial Pursuit
thing. Like the Trivial
yeah.
Pursuit thing, or a pie that you cut generously. And what you're going to do is you slide in like a construction action tile and the resources into the top wedge, and then you spin the whole wheel around so that your resources have to go all 6 steps around until they pop out again and you get that result. It's kind of as if like you're tying up the equipment itself, like you have infinite abundant resources, but the equipment itself is limited, so you can only be making, a dam every 4 or 5 turns or something like that. And that's a really interesting way to do resource management for me. I'm really kind of interested in different ways to do it other than you collect a pile of things in front of you and spend some of them to do a thing. So this is a new and interesting way to do resource management, in my opinion.
I mean, in games, certainly, but this feels like, listening to you describe it, this feels to me like the way you describe Passeraya when you talk to people and you say it's a deck building game and when you spend the money, it goes away. And I'm sitting here going, yes, when you make something, it takes time to make something. That's how making things works. So this is a resource game where you need to spend the resources, but you also need to spend the time to make a thing because duh.
Oh, that's such a, I didn't even think of that, but that makes perfect sense. And maybe it's that I'm just really excited by games that remove one level of abstraction from a thing.
I guess. I mean, it's also something I think about all the time because I have to deal with a lot of production times in my actual real job. Mm-hmm. So the fact that something takes time to make is 75% of the things I think about in a day.
But that's what just normal life is.
So, I mean, yeah, this makes sense. That you don't just, snap your fingers and then the raw materials turn into the finished goods.
So, back to the reason for the 3D board that it was so extravagant that I told you about. The game board is kind of split up, it's a landscape. You have hills, and then I think a valley, and then a canyon. And the way water works in the game is the water comes from the top, obviously, and then it's going to, I know, I'm removing an abstraction.
Game. That's how water works.
The water comes from the top of the board up on the mountains, and it comes down the paths or whatever, and you're building dams along the path to capture the water and use it to generate. But the 3D board, what they did is made it actually kind of like multiple tiers, not 6 or 7 or 8 inches tall tiers, but it's got a topography to it. There's the word. It's got a topography to it that is really cool and unique and is a really extravagant, unnecessary thing that just looks awesome. And I'm really excited to see what the final version of that looks like. It's also
going to look like a very shallow mountain.
Yeah, it is also $113 for that plus the fancy 3D board, so that is a little bit much.
Now, that includes the expansion as well, though, right?
Yes, that includes the base, the expansion, and the fancy board.
So the fancy board actually costs you $23.
Very, okay, yeah.
Because
true.
the base and the expansion are $90.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it is still $23 for a little plastic mountain, but
it's not plastic. It's all cardboard and magnetic tiers.
So it's a
Magnets.
water simulation made out of cardboard.
We're removing as many abstractions as possible.
Except for that one.
The next edition will come with a
pile of dirt.
With a pile of dirt and a bottle of water, and you have to make it yourself. How about that? But yeah, if you're interested in learning more about this, go check out Aaron's video. It's really cool. He talks a lot about it. He's been really excited about this game recently, and it just looks like it's a lot of exciting Euro crunchiness. I was going to say fun, but this is the kind of game where you're just like, yeah, this is crunchy and delicious and Euro-y.
You're describing granola now.
Granola is also delicious. All right, well, that's my Euro excitement in Kickstarter. I don't get to be super excited about Euro games and Kickstarters very frequently. We have two very good Euro games in the Kickstarter segment this week, so I feel very satisfied. Should we take a break and talk about some other games, perhaps, ones we've played?
Extant games, yeah.
I think that is a good move. All right, we'll be right back.
Want to wear your draft mechanic pride to your local brewery, board game meetup, or board game meetup at a brewery? Check out redbubble.com/people/draft mechanic for t-shirts.
All right, we're back. Let's talk about some board games. Danielle, you ready to talk about board games?
Sure, yeah.
What if those board games are on your screen, though?
That's not a board game.
Well, is it, though?
It is, actually.
Because we are talking about the digital edition of Terraforming Mars, one of the hottest board games of the last few years, now available on your Windows PC on Steam. This is a 2018 release from Asmodee Digital, obviously Fricks Games being the original designer, 1 to 5 players, and it is designed by Jacob Frixelius with development by Lucky Hammers. This is also the publishing or development studio who are going to be developing Asmodee Digital's upcoming Mansions of Madness game. Not the board game, but an adventure game set in the Mansions of Madness world. But we can obviously talk about that if and when that does finally happen in Q2 of next year.
Right now we're talking about Terraforming Mars.
Terraforming Mars. Danielle?
Terraforming Mars app implementation is an app implementation of Terraforming Mars. If you have not played Terraforming Mars, it is a game where you have a map of Mars in front of you and you are manipulating resources. You've got money, you've got steel, titanium, greenery, you've got heat and energy, and you are manipulating these resources in order to raise the temperature of Mars to a suitable level for the life that we're trying to put there. You're trying to build enough, or not build, but create enough oceans to sustain this life, and you are attempting to get the atmosphere to have enough oxygen so that you can maintain the life. And you are doing this by playing cards out in front of you on a tableau, and they are going to increase your production of certain resources, give you the resources outright, and you are going to use them to meet those 3 characteristics. You will get points along the way because points are the way that you win the game.
Points!
Once you have terraformed everything to the extent that it needs to be done.
Yeah. Terraforming Mars.
There is probably a much more in-depth description of Terraforming Mars that you can find, but if you're buying the app, you probably know something about the game, I'm thinking.
If you want to hear our thoughts on Terraforming Mars, we talked about it in episode 31, which is actually almost exactly 2 years ago, because it's also the episode that had our friend Dan live from Essen. So
Okay,
there you go.
That makes sense. Obviously, the short synopsis of that is we like this game very much, so much that I think we've purchased 4 expansions for it at this point. So it's a good game, and we also were really excited to check out the digital implementation. Now, to talk a little bit about what the digital implementation currently and will have, right now it does not have any draft play. They are looking to add that in an expansion, which is launching in December.
That's what they're aiming for.
You have only the standard play where you are just given a hand of cards, and that's what you pick from on your generational hand infusion. But they are looking to add drafting. They have online implementations so that you can have a private game with certain people or a public game, or you can just do a quick play. I did a quick play earlier and it worked really well. It was a really smooth implementation. There is a really interesting sort of video that goes with the playing of certain cards. So like when somebody played the nuclear zone, a little nuke went off on the area they played it. There was a big bright flash of light, and then all of the effects of that card happened in all of the little tableaus that were going on. It is currently on Steam. It is not on iOS and Android yet, I believe. But if you have a PC, this is an excellent thing to play. If you have a Steam Link, this game works so good on the Steam Link.
Yeah.
So I was playing it in our living room on my Steam Link, and all of the video and all of the audio was all nice and synced up. There wasn't any kind of lag with that. It plays really nicely. You don't have to worry about bumping the table and having your resource markers move, which was a big problem for a lot of people. It's all on your computer now. It keeps track of it. It makes sure that all of your increases and decreases are properly tracked, all your resources are spent correctly. It tracks all of the 3 different game end trackers, the oxygen, the heat, and the oceans in this one sort of condensed place, as opposed to on the board of the actual game. They're sort of spread out in order to make the UI for the game more streamlined and useful. They've combined those all down into one sort of really easy to read metric so you can see how far you're going. They've made it really easy to look at the different cards that you have and that have been played by other players. There's a place where you can go through and look through all the cards you've previously played and all the cards that other players have played. It tracks the actions that you can do on your turn in a separate area instead of just being in the cards played or leaving those cards up on the UI. There is a separate actions thing that is available to you. So if you've played a card that allows you to spend a steel to get 5 money every turn, that's going to show up in your little actions window, and you can go through and make sure on your turn that you've done all of your actions that you'd like to do before you're going to pass your turn, if you're going to pass, or if you're going to give up using one of your actions on a turn. You can just double check to make sure you've done all those actions. There is a separate little window that shows you the effects that will happen automatically. So if you've played a card that gives you 3 credits off any space tags that you play, that will show up in your effects window, and the game will do it automatically. But you can look at that, and you can look at it for other players. I think it is a really clear and really well-designed implementation of a game that could very easily be very, very messy. And I think especially the fact that it is on a computer, I would rather play this on Steam than on an Android or an iOS device. And I think in the past, games that have come to iOS devices straight away, I've played them on that and it has soured my experience. The thing that I'm thinking of is Race for the Galaxy, which is a very card-heavy game, but since I played it on my cell phone at first, I got really frustrated because it's very, very small and hard to see. But this is a Steam implementation first, and it is a really nice and clear Steam implementation.
I feel like saying clear is actually kind of underselling the visual appearance of this game. We got this on launch day. We got a review copy code from Asmodee Digital and started going at it pretty much right when we got home that night to, get the game played and see how it is, because we've been excited about this for a long time. We got a chance to take a poke at it at Gen Con, and we've been looking forward to this for quite some time. So I was live tweeting along as we were kind of playing a AI game, and I was just stunned at how gorgeous this game had become. And if you go back and listen to the last few years of commentary on Terraforming Mars, one of the biggest knocks against it is the production. It's not as pretty of a game as it feels like it should be. The basic original, the physical copy of Terraforming Mars. But the presentation that the designers and the developers, Lucky Hammers, did, it's slick and it's gorgeous and it's shiny. And like you were talking about, the nuclear explosion tile, for example, it's something that when we play it in the physical world and you put that card down, you're just like, I'm playing this nuclear explosion. Somebody might go boom in the corner or something, make a noise. But when the AI played that tile, or maybe it was the online game, somebody played that tile and it like straight up set a nuke off on the planet and blinded the screen out for a second. I was just like, holy crap, that was a big deal. And the same thing was true whenever you play oceans or greenery. These things, they generate into the map of Mars. You see the greenery sprout and grow, and all of the tiles are unique. And especially when you start forming oceans and stuff like that, the oceans all blend together. It's not just hex that is blue. This is a section that has ocean on it, and that ocean will go across and generate whatever it needs to for those particular spaces. The visual presentation of Terraforming Mars Digital is the best translation into a digital space that I've seen of a board game. Everything else up until this point has been a really good step or a good translation. Or if I think about a game like the Through the Ages app, which is really one of the other best apps in the space right now, they changed a lot about the presentation of that game and really, made it more of a visual game rather than just being a giant stack of cards, which is kind of how you deal with Through the Ages. That game made a huge jump into the digital space, and this is the one that's been the most startling in terms of the visual appearance to me. Okay,
the flip side of that, I do want to point out 2 things that aren't different. Mm-hmm. If you had a problem with the art, like if you didn't like seeing that little fluffy white dog, or if you a lot of the art is the same. So if you didn't like the art in the original game, the card art is going to be the same. Now, it is much less important because those cards aren't sitting in front of you all game. When you're not playing a card, they are in a little section in the center of the board with the back showing, so you're not looking at the card art then. You only see it when you pull it up to look at your cards to play them, and then once you've played them, they go into that actions or effects section where just the iconography is showing. So you're seeing so much less of the card art. So if that was a problem for you, it is the same, but it is much less prevalent.
I think another thing about them is that the physical appearance of the cards, like obviously in the physical world you have white border card that has graphic layout. These cards are less physical cards and more kind of dynamic representations of cards. The borders aren't a white border. You've got your fancy space border, and you've got expandable boxes to check, further details. Everything still has the flavor text at the bottom in a different way. So the appearance obviously is different, and it's more cohesive for the appearance that they're trying to give of a very futuristic design.
The other thing I will say is that it is very helpful to be familiar with the iconography system of this game before you start playing it. Because the cards do actually explain what they are in a somewhat thorough detail on each card, but when you look at them, when you're trying to select which cards to keep at the beginning of the game or at the beginning of each generation, or if you're looking at your hand very quickly, the zoomed out view which shows all of the cards just shows the iconography, not necessarily the written description of what the card does.
Yeah.
So this will be a lot easier to just jump into if you are familiar with the Terraforming Mars iconography. That being said, I don't find it terribly confusing, but there are a couple of things where, like, if you don't know that the brown border means production and the red circle or the red square around something means any, it may not be immediately clear if you're looking at a zoomed out view that that's what that means. If you know how to play Terraforming Mars, it works exactly the same and it looks exactly the same.
I do have a few other kind of frustrations with the graphic design and UI kind of stuff. There are a good number of times where a card's effect block will get cut off and you have to expand it, and you'll just see like the process change of a few icons and then a ... and you've got to go to, the expand this box thing. The other thing I will say is that if you are playing on a small screen, there's some tiny text and there's some really tiny indications on this screen. We're playing it via the Steam Link and we're sitting down there on, our living room TV, so it's big. But even across, from the couch to the TV there, I'm still at times squinting, and we've had a number of times where we've looked at a card not in a blown up view and we've been like, is that a 6 or a 9 cost there? And we pull it up and, it's easy enough to figure that out. But this is a game that's going to take a lot of screen real estate, and you have to be aware of that. After playing this on the Steam Link and on our TV, I am a little concerned how this will translate to an iPad and especially an iPhone, which is what I know is in the future for them, getting it to that smaller 5-inch screen, that they are trying to get it down to that smaller device.
They are going to release it as a mobile, not just a tablet
As
app?
I understand, I know, we got a poke at the tablet version, and as I understand, they are at least looking at iPhone. I don't know if it's confirmed, but I can only imagine they would try to get there.
I don't know. I mean, I feel like this is something that you bring to a tablet level and you leave it at a tablet level, which is definitely something you can do with apps. You can just release a tablet app.
True.
And I have a feeling that, we're looking at a large screen, but we're looking at it from across the room.
Yeah.
Like, if you were playing this on our computer monitor, which is obviously a much smaller screen than our TV, but you're much closer to it, and the resolution, therefore, is a lot easier to read.
True.
I have a feeling that wouldn't be an issue. If you had an iPad, which, as far as I can tell from having seen the new iPads, they're like a sheet of paper size screen. Like, if that were close to you, that's a small computer monitor at that point.
Okay.
And you should be able to do it. Now, I agree with you. If you tried to play this on a phone, even on a big phone, it's going to be very, very small. And I don't know how you'd even get your fingers in to select the correct hexes. You'd need, like, a stylus or something.
Or I would assume that they would then layer the menus in some way, have, like, sub-buttons and stuff like that.
Just play it on your dang computer.
Yeah, just it plays great on the computer.
It's also not on iOS and Android right
now.
Yeah,
we're talking about hypotheticals. They do have an update coming out in the next few days that is fixing some of the launch bugs. There are some cards that don't work correctly, which is never a good look for a first, launch of a game. It's kind of weird that some of these snuck through. I know that like one of the milestones was giving points to the wrong players kind of level of bugs. Like,
yeah, but frankly, it's on the list. It was 3 cards and 1 milestone out of, 200 cards that were... One of the issues was that you could put a card that was supposed to be in a specific spot anywhere. So if you played the card correctly the way it said, it would be fine, but you could have put it anywhere.
Fair.
Either way, by the time this episode goes live, that update should be out in the next couple of days.
Yeah. And then, like we talked about, that December update, they are putting drafting in, hopefully in December. That's what they've got on their timeline. And I'm really excited about that. I thought that was going to be a variant that would be like 6 months off or something. Maybe when they did an expansion, if they did the Venus Next or the alternate maps or something. And just knowing Asmodee and Asmodee Digital in general, I'm pretty sure we're going to get those expansions eventually. They haven't been announced yet. But I feel like we need to talk about the value question.
Okay.
So this is a $25 game, which, to my knowledge, is the highest priced video or digital implementation of a board game that's been released. I know Through the Ages on iOS and Android is $10, and that's kind of the most expensive that I can think of. There may have been 1 or 2 other games that came out on Steam and might be in that 15 to 20, but I don't think we've seen anything north of $20 yet. Do you feel like there's $25 worth in this game?
Yes.
Okay.
I do, for a couple of reasons. One, when you're talking about app costs versus game costs, I feel like there's sort of a dichotomy there. Yeah, Through the Ages is the most expensive app I can think of that's a board game implementation that I can play on my phone. Yeah. But Civ 6 costs like $70 if you buy it as a bundle.
Oh, yeah, true.
And that's not technically a board game, but it's a civilization building game. It could very easily be a board game.
Yeah.
And they're not selling this on phones. They're selling it on Steam, where $25 for a well done Steam game is not a big ask. I mean, you can buy a lot of things that look a lot worse for a lot more on Steam right now. So I have a feeling that they're appealing to a group of people who's not going to look at a $25 game and say, that's a big waste of money. I could just buy... Also, the fact that Terraforming Mars is still $70 MSRP helps a little bit.
True.
That game is not going to be super cheap. And if you are looking at getting any expansions, you're going to spend over $100 on that game. So I have a feeling this is going to be an entry point for people who are excited about Terraforming Mars, who like it already, or who have seen it and want a way to play it with people who aren't right there with them.
Yeah.
I don't think the cost is going to be as big a barrier as it would have been if this were a mobile game release and they were trying to compete with like free-to-play or microtransaction games where people don't want to spend more than $5 on a game on their phone. Like, I think the marketplace they're selling it in will make the cost more reasonable.
Okay. I agree. I would have purchased this for $25, even if we hadn't got the review copy. I was ready to, and we just, hadn't got this opportunity to talk about it, really early on like this. But especially after getting a chance to poke at it at Gen Con and then having played with it for a few days, if you're a fan of Terraforming Mars and you have the time to be at your computer, or you have friends across the country that can, play with you online, it's really good. And like the fact that they're already pushing out updates that we want in December, and like I said, I can only imagine that the other stuff is on the way soon. It's really freaking good.
You mentioned time in that, and I do want to touch on the fact that even if you're playing against completely AI opponents, this is not a bang a game out in 20 minutes game.
Yeah, true.
Like, you're going to spend an hour playing a game of this, even if you're playing against computers and you bump the computers up to fast speed, which, by the way, if you are familiar with Terraforming Mars, I highly recommend bumping the AI speed up from default to fast, because otherwise you will spend 3 hours waiting for your AI opponents to play their cards. Apparently they need to think. But especially if you're playing with another player, you need to make sure that you open up all your cards and you check other people's tableaus, which takes a little bit longer than just looking across the table at somebody's cards and being like, oh, they have 7 cubes and trees. You have to click on the thing and go look at their resources in their window and then click back to your own, so you make sure that you're not looking at their resources when you're trying to figure out your stuff, which I did a couple of times, which was my fault. But this is going to be an hour and a half game if you're going to play a game of it. Now, if you're playing against the AI, you can just close it out and come back to it. But if you're sitting down with other people, know that this is the kind of game where you are going to want to like carve out a minute to get your strategy going, and you're going to need to sit down and play the whole game. Yeah. This is not going to be, I can play 6 games of it in an evening just sitting on the couch.
Cool. You have anything else you want to say about it?
No, I just really like it quite a bit. It's very pretty, and it does a good job implementing a game, which is very good.
Yeah. Well, Terraforming Mars Digital Edition is now available on Steam.
Do it. Next up, we are talking about Orbis, which is a 2018 game from Space Cowboys that plays 2 to 4 players in about 45 minutes. The designer is Tim Armstrong, and the artist is David Ticello. This is a game of drafting, tile placement, and option limiting.
Orbis is, as Danielle just said, a drafting and tile placement game where you are assembling kind of a pyramid shape of hex tiles that is your universe. Because, surprise, you're a god creating a universe. We're very proud of you and the universe you're about to create. But the way it's going to work is you have these hex tiles, and they come in different colors for different kinds of landscapes. You have temples, you got gardens, you've got red spaces that are volcanoes, and the blue ones that are water and irrigation, stuff like that. All those colors, basically each color will do a different kind of thing depending on if you take that tile. You have 9 tiles set up in the drafting area at the beginning of the game, and every player is going to take turns taking these tiles. In the first round, most of them are free, which is good because you have nothing. You just have an empty space in front of you. But as you take tiles, you're going to be placing these cubes, which are followers, onto any orthogonally adjacent tiles from where you took. So if I take the temple one out of the very middle, the north, south, east, and west tiles are all going to get a white follower cube on them. Hooray! If you end up taking a tile that has follower cubes on it, you get those cubes. Congratulations, now you have followers.
Hooray!
You're going to spend those followers to buy other tiles.
Hooray!
And then the abstractions come into play. You spend your followers to buy the higher level tiles that have different requirements. Maybe this one needs a yellow and a white follower. This one needs a green and a blue follower. And maybe this one needs 3 followers and 2 of them have to be white and the other one's a wild. And, something like that. Basically, you're getting cubes and using those cubes to buy better parts that will become your kind of point generation engine that is this pyramid. But
Hooray!
I feel like I need to talk about the pyramid now because this is where the most interesting decisions you're going to make come into play. You are going to start, unsurprisingly, on the bottom of your pyramid, which can be 5 hex tiles wide. You'll start by placing a tile, and then placing tile adjacent to that, left or right, so on and so forth, to a maximum of 5. But if you want to go up, that's good because that's the only direction you can build once you've filled out that bottom row. When you want to build above a pair of tiles, you're going to build, into the space that is above the 2, adjoining sides of tiles. That tile you placed must be the color of one of the 2 tiles below it. So if I have a blue and a green next to each other, I can only place a blue or a green tile in the space above the 2 of them. Since you are going from 5 up to a pyramid of 1 at the top, or actually 2, but we'll talk about that later, you obviously can see that you're going to be restricting your options as you go up. If you start with all 5 colors at the very bottom, by the time you get up to that 3rd row of your pyramid, you're only going to be able to place 3 of those colors because one of them will have been kicked out after the very beginning, after you move up to that 2nd floor, so on and so forth. And you're going to try to place these tiles in certain ways. Certain tiles will give you certain payouts, and we'll probably talk about that when we get to the gameplay discussion here in a bit. But basically, you will get more points depending on what tiles go on top of what tiles, and how you use your followers in certain ways to also get more points. But as you can see, you will obviously occasionally come into a position where you cannot place a tile out of the drafting. Well, all of the tiles on the back have a wilderness, which is a -1 point tile that is also a wild. So you can start a new chain. If you're really playing around with it, you can probably find a way to work this to your advantage to bring a new color into your pyramid, which is kind of cool because, then you can get that other super tile that you really wanted. The game will continue until you finish rows 2 through 5 of your pyramid. You'll only have 2 at the very top because you will be placing a god tile at the very top. Now, the god tiles are a set of tiles that will have a kind of a special scoring condition. Maybe somebody who makes all your wilderness tiles worth 0 points instead of -1 and is worth 1 point. Maybe there's another one that gets you 3 points if you have the most something or other. But you can choose, instead of drafting a tile out of the center, to draft your god tile at any time from that other tableau section, and then at the very end you place your god tile atop your pyramid because it'll look satisfying to do so. It doesn't actually score you any points when you place it there. It scores it no matter where you put it. And then if you have the most points, congratulations. You're the best Orbis. Or the best Orbiter?
No,
Orbs.
no.
Orbs.
So, Jake, how did you like Orbis?
It's fine.
It's fine.
And I feel like when we were talking about Essen, we talked about 4 or 5 years ago, a lot of games that come out now would be incredible and be like, wow, all this stuff. Orbis is kind of one of those games. It's perfectly functional. It's fun. It has some neat interactions, and I like what I'm doing there. I'm placing my tiles, and I'm getting followers, and thinking about how I'm going to convert A to B to C, but it doesn't do anything particularly new in that regard, I think is how I feel about it. Like, we've seen you have to stack things in a certain way in other games that we really enjoy. Best Treehouse Ever, for example. You've got to build your lines of color. You can only have one block of a specific color in your treehouse, and you've got to balance back and forth. This one does it in a different way. Obviously, you're building from wide to skinny, and that's cool. It's an interesting puzzle. We had many times where you're just like, oh, I really want to get that particular irrigation tile because I got a good thing here, but oh, I don't have any blue here. Oh no.
Irrigation tiles aren't something you actually talked about in the overview, but the way they work is they are always blue tiles, which means they need to be placed on top of a pair of tiles which contains a blue tile, and then they will give you additional points if there is below them a tile of a different color, of a non-blue color.
Yeah.
So you essentially have to have the pair of tiles that it is requiring, blue and whatever the thing that it says on it, in order to be able to place it. So if you can create this, then you are going to have the perfect spot for this one irrigation tile, but you need to have that tile out in the drafting pool at the exact right point, and you need to be keeping blue open if you want to have more than one irrigation tile. You need to keep blue moving up your pyramid, otherwise you're never going to be able to place a blue tile on top of anything.
Yeah, and that's an interesting situation, and it's fun to think about. Had I played this game 3 or 4 or 5 years ago, I might have enjoyed it a lot more. And maybe this would be a kind of a game that would stick around, like how I Can't Stop Playing Among the Stars. Because, I'll be honest, I know Among the Stars is not the greatest game ever made, but it's my favorite non-time stories game. And I feel like Orbis is the kind of game that is in that space. Somebody's going to love this game. And frankly, people getting into games, I think this is a really good game to play because it's easy to grok, it's easy to understand the way the pieces work together, and you do get some really interesting decisions and some interesting manipulation of the puzzle pieces. That being said, I'm not over the moon about it. But it's fine.
Yeah, I agree there are certainly some interesting choices. When you are setting up that initial row, what order are you going to put your colors in? Are you going to, in fact, have all 5 colors in the bottom row? Or are you going to go heavy on a couple of colors and then place some wilderness tiles if you need to place any of the other colors that you don't have in your original row? But you also need to think about when you're taking tiles that those tiles are placing out followers of specific colors out onto the board. So some of the tiles, in order to place them, require you to remove followers of a certain color from the tiles which are out available for draft. The volcano is one that jumps to mind. But if there aren't enough cubes of that, you can't remove those tiles. So you're being very careful when you take a tile that you're not giving somebody else what they need in order to be able to take a tile that they need. Or, maybe there is a tile that requires red followers, and you see that nobody has red followers, and there's one red tile. You don't want to take that red tile because it's going to put red followers out onto the board for other people to have so they can get the other tile. There are really interesting puzzles about it. But at the same time, there is also a point, like if you're halfway through the game and you've only got 3 colors in your pyramid, it's entirely possible that there are just none of those tiles out.
Yeah.
And then your option is to take a wilderness tile. You do have an option, but it does feel really unsatisfying. You're like, I went through all the trouble to make this thing work the way it was working, and then the flip just didn't work for me. Which can be a little meh.
I feel like what I want that would spice this game up a little bit more is some kind of a variable player power tied to the gods. Like, I would like to have a god power that is not just an endgame scoring condition, but maybe it gives me an interesting way to play with the followers or play with my tiles when I take that tile as well. I feel like something like that might be interesting. Like, if the wilderness tile person, and it, allows me to swap the positions of 2 tiles or something like that. Some kind of additional thing like that, which could happen in an expansion if it ever gets to that point, but I feel like that might be the kind of thing that would make it exciting for me to play more.
maybe for you. I don't feel like that would do it for me. I'm not saying that wouldn't make it better for a certain group of players.
Yeah.
I don't know. This game is solidly fine. There is absolutely nothing wrong with it. I just don't care.
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't grab me in the way that I want it to grab me.
Yeah, I can understand that. It's kind of how I feel. We got a chance to play it at a games cafe, and I'm glad we did.
Yeah, we played it a couple of times,
Yeah.
and we came out of every game feeling like, okay, that is a perfectly good game,
Yeah.
but it's not one we need.
So, if those mechanics seemed interesting to you, maybe go check it out at a game cafe. There's obviously a number of them in the country and in the world that you can go check out. Play Orbis and see if it's the game for you.
Perhaps.
Next up, oh boy. I'm going to need some help here. Danielle, next up, we're going into the CarcaZone! But it's for the Catapult. We played the Catapult, Carcassonne expansion number 7. This is a 2008 release from Rio Grande Games. It it seats 2 to 6 players in about 30 to 45 minutes. This was designed by Klaus Jürgen Werder in a fit of panic. Art by Doris Mataus. This is a game of tile placement, area control, and dexterity.
Hey, wait a minute.
Yeah, Carcassonne, the CarcaZone, but the Catapult. CarcaZone Catapult. Danielle, why did we do this?
Because Patrick Hillier is a nice man, and he sent us his copy of the Catapult so that we could play it. Because we talk about all the Carcassones.
We talk about all the Carcassones.
Thank you, Patrick, for bringing this abomination into our gaming space.
Danielle, do you want to explain how the Carcassonne exists on the table?
Sure. Carcassonne is a game that if you don't know how Carcassonne plays by now, you've not been listening to Draft Mechanic. Carcassonne is a game where you draw a tile and you place a tile so that the features on the tile line up with the features that are already extant on the board. You've got roads, they need to line up with roads. You've got cities, they need to connect to parts of cities. You've got a river, if you're playing with a river, that needs to connect to the river. You've got farms, and you can put farmers in there, and they take a nap, and at the end of the game, you get points for all the cities that are in their farms, because that's how naps work.
Aren't farmers like generally hardworking people that
Yes.
do a lot of work? Why are all of the farmers in Carcassonne laying down? We've never really talked about this existential crisis. I am attempting to delay talking about the Catapult. Carry on, Danielle.
They're laying down because you need to be able to know which ones are farmers at the end of the game.
Could we give them a hat?
No, because we already have 6,000 different Carcassonne meeples.
We have a few maples.
Anyway, so that's how you play Carcassonne normally. Draw a tile, place a tile, get some points. When you run out of tiles, you end the game. Like every Carcassonne expansion, I'm pretty sure every one, the Catapult adds new tiles. These tiles have a little traveling fair on them, not to be confused with the circus that we talked in under the big top. This is a much older fair, I guess.
It's a less fair.
That is very true.
Boy.
And it comes with this thing. If you've ever seen cheater chopsticks that are connected at the end, they look like giant tweezers. Mm-hmm. It comes with one of those, but it's about like a foot long.
Yeah, okay. If you've ever seen 2 pieces of wood joined together at a 30-degree angle.
I guess. It is not a catapult shape. I will point that out.
Yeah.
And it comes with a bunch of little tokens. And the tokens have 4 different icons on them that represent the 4 different types of catapult activities which you can choose from when you draw and place a tile which has one of these little catapult fairs on it. Mm-hmm. You will, for the record, place that tile just the way you would any other Carcassonne tile. The roads on it need to match up with the roads. The fields continue existing fields. If there are any cities, that needs to match up to a city. So that part works like regular Carcassonne. But when you place the Carcassonne catapult tile, you immediately stop the game of Carcassonne that you're playing.
And walk away from the catapult.
Yes.
Realize what you've done.
And then, whoever placed that tile decides which of the 4 games they would like to play. There is either the knockout game, where you are taking your little square chit of cardboard that has the knockout icon on it, and you're putting it on the catapult, and you are pulling the catapult back and flinging, theoretically, this cardboard tile onto the board. Good luck with that. And if it lands on the board and hits one of the meeples that has been placed to mark a feature that somebody has been claiming in a perfectly reasonable game of Carcassonne,
That meeple is dead.
that meeple is returned to their owner to be deployed at a later time.
Fine.
There is a second game, which is the target practice, where everybody, and like I didn't mention this, everybody gets a chance to play all of these games. There is a target practice one where everybody gets a chance to fling the little target chit at the tile that was just placed, and whoever gets closest to the tile that was just placed is the winner, which feels very unfair if you're not playing on a table where everybody is equidistant from any of the tiles, but whatever. You get points if you are the closest. You get 5 points, I think it is. Mm-hmm. There is the catch game, where everybody places... You take turns. Players will place the little measuring ruler that this game comes with.
Mm-hmm. Comes with a little stick that's about 15 centimeters long, and it has the most horrifying art of meeples I've ever seen in my life.
There are little meeples that are doing people things, and it bothers Jake.
If the actual shape of a meeple had a face and was smiling, and like imagine Gumby but a meeple. Yeah, so that's Gumby? What it is. No, but
Okay, anyway, so you take this little measuring stick and you put it between you.
Sticks.
And then the person who is doing the flinging will place their little catch chit on the catapult and fling it towards the other person. If they manage to fling it across the measuring stick so it goes far enough, and the other person doesn't catch it, doesn't catch it, then the person flinging gets points. If you catch it, the person catching gets points. Yeah. If it doesn't go across the line, which happens a lot, the person catching gets points. And everybody goes around the table and gets a chance to both fling and catch their little chit. You get the 5 points for everybody that earns it for that. The final game is called Seduction. Which is weird.
Sorry.
You take your little seduction chit.
Meeple seduction.
And you put it on the catapult.
Why is this happening?
You know, the catapult, the typical thing of seduction. You fling the chit at the board, and whichever meeple is closest to the chit, if it lands on the board, you have the option to switch that meeple with either one of your meeples, which is already on the board, or one of the ones from your reserve. And it will go either to the location on the board that it was switched with, or it will go back to the owner's reserve if it is switched with one from your reserve. Then you go back and you try to remember who placed this tile in the first place.
Who brought this upon us?
And you go back to playing your regular normal game of Carcassonne. And you keep drawing tiles until you run out of tiles, and at the end of the game, whoever has the most points wins once you've counted up the remaining features that are left on the board, like in a normal, reasonable game of Carcassonne.
All right, well, listeners, we've had a lot of fun here today, but
we?
It's time for me to talk real about Carcassonne the Catapult. I've made a lot of comments over the last year about how the Catapult is the stupidest freaking thing that's ever happened in Carcassonne, and while that still remains true, I did have some fun. I didn't have fun with Carcassonne the Catapult itself, but I had fun playing it with you, Danielle, and our friends that we were playing with as well. It was such a surreally weird Carcassonne experience to me to play this thing, not just because of the novelty of this is a catapult in a dexterity game in this Euro, but kind of the weirdness of the fact that this thing exists. And really huge heartfelt thanks to Patrick Hillier for sending this over so we could get a chance to play with it, because it's the kind of thing that I never thought I would get a chance to play, and kind of the whole fun of the whole reason that the CarcaZone started is because we had a chance to play the city, which is a Carcassonne I never thought I'd get a chance to play. So having that moment was worth suffering through an hour of the worst physical component this side of Coaster Park. The catapult doesn't work. It physically... We could not get the thing to fling a token past the end of the catapult.
I mean, a bunch of you did.
Well, only by modifying it.
That's true. We were playing it with a civil engineer, and he's looking at this thing going, that's not going to work. Like, the way this physically works, it'll just fling things, and they'll land at the end of it, which is largely what happened. Mm-hmm. We ended up taking the catapult and setting it up on a slight angle on top of the lids for the tins that we used to contain the meeples in our game. But it is... not a highly technical tool, I will say.
I think that's my frustration with the catapult, more than anything else, more than all of the negative talk about it, so on and so forth, is the component itself is not good. I love the idea of the, as much as we joke about it, the seduction one where you swap a meeple out.
That is a fun game, but it needs a new name.
Yeah, no question. It could be the meeple prisoner exchange or the swap or the clan's destined secret person or something like that. A secret meeple, a seeple? No,
Nope.
Smeeple. Smeeple. There you go. But I liked the idea of you had the opportunity to swap somebody out on the board because I had a position that I was in where I had a meeple that was on a city that was only one football half, and there was no chance of another tile getting the other spot. And I was able to use that particular tile to get that guy out of there, and I loved that. That's such a cool mechanic. Unfortunately, it relies on the worst physical component that Carcassonne has ever had. Same thing with Knockout. Knockout, kind of cool. I feel like that was the funnest way that we've had meeple elimination, because the tower is so freaking cruel, and the dragon never really got there. Rarely ever eats anything. The Knockout was kind of fun, because it added a little bit of excitement into being able to remove a meeple, and you have the little risk of, oh, what if I hit my own thing? This could actually go bad. The target throwing and the catch, those are just stupid. And, sure, it was fun to kind of fling a piece of cardboard at somebody else, but they don't have anything to do with Carcassonne. The other two pieces are a good idea with the stupid Catapult. And that's kind of the big thing that is a disappointment about Carcassonne the Catapult to me, is not that it is, it's the worst thing ever. It's just it could have actually had some good ideas in it, but we didn't use those things in the way that it was useful. All right, there's my rant. Danielle?
Okay. You didn't actually touch on the thing that irritated me the most about this expansion, which was that, I feel like a good expansion integrates with the game that you're playing well.
Yes.
This felt like a cookie that had, the worst chips ever in it. But, that didn't integrate at all. You'd be eating a cookie, and then you get a bite of, an edamame bean or something, and you're like, this is different, and it doesn't go, and it doesn't melt. You stop playing your game of Carcassonne. You are playing a perfectly reasonable game of Carcassonne.
Yeah.
You stop it dead. You do this thing which has nothing to do with your game of Carcassonne half the time. If you're playing Knockout or Seduction, you're at least interacting with the game of Carcassonne. But if you're playing Catch, you could do it anywhere. You could go into another room and play the Catch game, and then come back, and you're once again playing Carcassonne. And I said
whose turn it is.
I said that in the overview, but it was true. The number of times, of the 12 times that we pulled one of these catapult tiles, that we came back and were like, who the heck even put that? Whose turn is it now? It felt like you were interrupting a good game that you're playing. We've played enough Carcassonne, you have the strategic and emotional arc of a game of Carcassonne at this point. This felt like interrupting that, and it was really kind of I would see somebody place one of those tiles, I was like, dang it, I just want a Carcassonne at this point. Mm-hmm. It also did not take 30 to 45 minutes. It took well over an hour.
Yeah.
Which I felt kind of bad for, because we had told some other folks that we would play a game afterwards with them, and they ended up waiting quite a while, because
Who would have thought? Yeah.
Yeah, we took over an hour playing this Carcassonne.
Can I wrap this up with one of Jake's fabulous metaphors?
Sure.
All right.
Gotta be better than this weird edamame cookie metaphor.
No, but it got me thinking. So Carcassonne, the Catapult. So imagine Carcassonne, a game of Carcassonne, is a thing you really enjoy. Maybe you're going to a Japanese steakhouse with 3 of your friends.
With Carcassonne?
It's a metaphor, Danielle. Carcassonne's not there. Oh. So anyway, you and 3 of your friends are going to the Japanese steakhouse that is for some reason called Carcassonne. And the chef is doing the fun stuff. He's got the little pyramid of onions and lights it on fire, and you're getting a shrimp, all over the place, and he makes your food. And then from across the bar, somebody throws a McDouble at you. Like a cheeseburger. Just here it's a cheeseburger. That's the Catapult. It's just why is this here? Why did you throw McDonald's at me?
Where did you even get this?
Where did you get this, and why is it here? That McDouble is not going to work in this context. So that's the Catapult. That is Jake's trademarked official metaphor for what it is. I'm glad that I had the chance to play it. Yes. Period. End of sentence.
I don't want to sound ungrateful for this opportunity, but we will put it back in a box, and it will go back to Patrick, and we will sleep well at night knowing we no longer have it.
Yes. Patrick, thank you so much. You were a dear friend. I feel like my debt has been paid.
I also want to say, if you, for some reason, are very excited about this, it's not really available. That's why we had to get a copy from Patrick. This is out of print.
$100 at Gen Con or something, wasn't it?
It was $75
Oh, what a steal.
At the Rio Grande discount booth that they have running at Gen Con. They had one copy. And it sold. So somebody wants this. If it's you, congratulations. You sure did get it.
Yep. All right. Well, until the next time we meet again in the CarcaZone.
In Champions of Midgard, you competed to become the Jarl of your village, protecting it from draugrs and trolls. But any good Viking knows that the best defense is a good offense.
Upcoming Kickstarter from Grey Fox Games, Reavers of Midgard, you will venture out from your village, recruiting the most fearsome warriors, the Reavers, to assist you in putting a mean hurt on your neighbors. Reavers bring new recruits, increase your options in battle, and lead your fighting ships. Through their help and with strategic choices about when is the best time to make your moves so that you and only you reap the benefits, you will become the most glorious Viking around.
Especially since Gunnar went to Mars.
Well, yes.
Reavers of Midgard hits Kickstarter on Thursday, November 1st.
Check it out along with all the other great Grey Fox games at greyfoxgames.com.
Grey Fox Games, quality games, cleverly crafted. So next up, we have a 6-pack review for you of Cryptid. This is a 2018 release from Osprey Games that plays 3 to 5 players in 30 to 50 minutes. The designers are Hal Duncan and Ruth Vevers, and the artist is Kwanchai Moria. This is a game of deduction, misdirection, and pretty much more straight-up deduction. I do also want to say that this was a review copy that we got from Osprey.
So, Cryptid is a pure logic, basically, deduction game where you and all of the other players are trying to locate one particular space on a map that fulfills everybody's condition. Each player has a secret condition that deals with the terrain in some way. The terrain is a map of hex boards that you're going to put out based on a particular setup card that will also tell every player what rule to look at in their books. The terrain is split up into different kinds of terrain. You have desert, you have swamp and water and stuff like that. There's also some structures you're going to put around the board of 3 colors or 4 colors in the advanced game, and then 2 types. You have the standing stone and the abandoned camp, basically column and triangle of those 4 or 3 different colors. There will also be some areas on the board that are either bear territory or cougar territory, and those are marked by dotted lines on a selection of spaces. Depending on how the board is lined up, you're going to have only one space, one hex space on that entire board that will fulfill everybody's condition. Because, for example, my condition might be the monster is within one space of desert. Another player might have the monster is within 3 spaces of a blue structure, so on and so forth. There's a set of different kinds of clue structures that are very clearly defined. You have, it's on type A or B of terrain. You have within 1 space of type A, within 2 spaces of a specific structure or territory, or within 3 spaces of a kind of structure or either of the animal territories. I think something basically like that. But all of those structures are clearly defined on the back of your player book. So as you are as you're gaining knowledge as the game goes on, you're going to use what you know about the clues and the answers you get from other players to kind of deduce what could be a space that has all of those conditions met.
What kind of answers?
Well, I'm glad that you asked that, because that was the next thing I wanted to talk about. The way that the game actually plays is, on my turn, I'm going to point at a space on the board, and I'm going to say to another player, for example, Danielle, could the monster be in this space? And then Danielle will look at that particular space, and based on her rule, she will either put a cube to say, no, by my rule, the monster could not be there, or a kind of a disc to say, yes, by my rule, the monster could be there. If the person that I ask has to place a cube, then I also have to place a cube. So if I get a no in response, I have to give up a no somewhere else on the board as well. This is the only place where you have any kind of wiggle room, where you're getting a chance to place out your no. You can kind of try to misdirect a little bit, but I do want to make it clear that any answers you give must be correct, unless you forgot your rule, but we'll deal with that later. In the advanced version of the game, it brings in the fourth color of structure, and it also brings in complicated clues, which are not, or inverse of clues. So maybe you will have a clue that the monster is not on swamp or desert, or maybe the monster is not within 3 of a blue structure. And those are going to add another layer of kind of mental gymnastics onto this logic puzzle. If at some point you feel like you've got everybody's rule figured out, and you found the space that is the one that you think it is, you can choose to place the pawn. There is one guess pawn, and you put the pawn on that space, you put a disc on of your color saying, I am saying the monster can be here by my rule, and then you'll go around the circle, and everybody else will have to either place a disc saying, yes, that satisfies my clue. If it gets all the way around and everybody says yes, then that original person wins. If at any time a person places a cube and says no, that guess round is over, and the guesser has to place a cube out as well. So, if you make it all the way around and everybody says yes, you have won, and you have found whatever cryptid it is. Congratulations, you did the thing.
Hooray!
So, Cryptid was my number one thing that I wanted to see going into Gen Con. I got directly there, went straight to the Osprey Games booth, and while they were getting their stuff set up, I walked over to Oink, picked up a few tiny boxes of games and or pieces of cardboard. And then I walked back over to Osprey. You met me there. Shane met up with us. And we played through 3 or 4 rounds of the way that the game works until we realized that we had gotten something slightly wrong. And we're just like, oh, well, crap. Well, we'll just come back at a later time and get a fuller game in. Gen Con being what it was, of course, that didn't happen. And we've just been waiting for a chance to get some plays of this game in. So when we finally got a copy of it in a week or so ago, this one jumped right to the top of the queue, got a whole bunch of plays in right away, and I'm ready to talk about it. First impressions, the deduction is awesome.
Yes.
I love the way the deduction works in this game. Every single game we've played of this, everybody around the table spends their entire time staring at that board, and we're all looking at the cubes, we're looking at the discs, and it's such an interesting puzzle to put together. And 3, 4, and 5 players have all worked really well, and every single one of those has produced a satisfying result. To the point where in our very last 4-player game, when we were playing an advanced card, after we were finished with it, we were so interested with the way that all of the clues had to work together that I just looked up the answers for the 3-player version of that, and it worked too. And I was just like, oh, wow. I'm starting to understand the way...
I assume they all work.
Yeah, obviously they all work. But I'm starting to understand the way that the clues kind of work together to section off parts of the board, which is the really interesting and exciting thing about this. I would love to see the algorithms and the math behind this game. And I'm sure that it's out there somewhere. This had to be designed with some kind of math or formula. But I have to be a little disappointed about it as well. And we can talk about this stuff right up first, because when you look at the cover of the game, Cryptid, it's got this gorgeous Quanchai Moria art. We have a cryptid, some kind of a eel-bound, water-bound eel thing. And you're like, wow, this is so cool. You're going to find all these monsters. And the board, you set it up. The hexes are nice. It's, it's clear. It's very clear and easy to understand. It's got, the good, bright Quanchai Moria colors.
Yeah, there's a touch of board art as well, but not much.
And then when you flip up the setup cards, it is just straight up numbers and text. And I am bummed that they didn't follow through on the theming. This is your best batter setting up the best possible home run, and then just kind of hits a safe second. Not Quanchai, but Osprey, Quanchai together, all these things, a really cool theme, super solid backbone. There's no follow-through on the theme.
Yeah, I want to be clear. We are talking about the theme here, and it is almost non-existent in the game.
And that's a big letdown. Even if those cards themselves had up at the top, give me like it's this monster, or maybe at the end of it, you get a QR code to pull up what the monster is. Because I was thinking about this later, and if the cards had, it's the abominable snowman, or something like this on this particular card, you'd be like, well, obviously we're going to look in the mountains first, right, guys?
Yeah.
Which makes sense, but I would like some kind of follow-through in some way about that. Maybe that would have put the art cost of the game really high. It's possible. There's a lot of different combination cards in this. Maybe this is the kind of thing that they can expand upon with the app implementation, because there is an app version, or not an app version, but an app-enhanced setup for the game, which is nice.
Oh, that's right. We didn't really play with that terribly many times. It was easy enough to just handle on our own.
Yeah, but I want more follow-through on it. And I'm hoping, with the app-enhanced part of it, that we can get some of that in the future.
That being said, this game is just awesome at deduction.
Yeah.
I absolutely loved playing it. The way that you are trying to figure out what everybody's rule is. And on your turn, you can ask the player that is relevant to what you're trying to figure out if the monster can be in a specific place. If I've gone through this game and we're halfway through and I know what Jake's rule is and I know what Dan's rule is, but I don't know what Andrea's rule is, I can ask Andrea, is the monster here? And I will get some kind of information. I may have to give out information as well, because if I don't know what her rule is, I very well might ask in a place that she is going to put a cube on and say, no, the monster can't be here, and then I'm going to have to give up information to everybody else. But you can tailor your requests for information to what you are trying to figure out. And there are a lot of times in games that we've been playing where I know I'm trying to figure out something different than everybody else. Just because I've figured out what somebody's rule is, and I'm obviously not trying to figure out my own rule. There's also going to be a point in a lot of these games where you look around and you realize one player has like one piece on the board, and you're like, what's going on with that? How have we ignored them? And you need to figure out, like, everybody knows we need to get some pieces on the board for that person, otherwise we're just going to be guessing blindly where this thing is. And because you have all of the rules written out in front of you in a basic, I want to say basic, but in like the regular version of the game, they are literally written out in front of you, and in the advanced they are written out, and you have to assume inverse is a possibility. But you can say, like, okay, I know looking at the cube, it can't be one of the ones where it's on two different types of terrain, because they've got circles on more than two different types of terrain, so I can eliminate all of those. Okay, I don't see any pattern with the circles being close to structures, so I can eliminate the structure ones. Is it maybe like a hunting ground one? Well, no, they've got a circle all the way over in the corner, well away from the hunting grounds and everything. So you can eliminate huge swaths of what you think somebody's clue might be, unless they're very smart about the way they put their cubes and nobody's asking the right questions, in which case you can be absolutely in the weeds.
Yeah. I think that was the thing that surprised me the most about this game. I remember when I very first heard about it, I heard deduction and a little bit of subterfuge. And I'm like, okay, so it's social deduction. But then I learned a little bit more, and I'm like, no, it's straight pure logic deduction. You have to give the correct answers. I'm like, oh, okay, cool. And then the fact that it's not about the answers that you give, it's about the answers that you don't give, raises that bar another level. I love that kind of deduction where the way that you give your answer is something that's going to complicate and color the way that that answer is given. I think this is the kind of thing that a lot of deduction games kind of miss. And Cryptid in particular, one thing I forgot to mention, the very first move in the game is everybody places a no cube. And I feel like that one step right there sets the entire game up to be excellent. Because if you are really smart about the way that the board is set up and the way that the clues work together, like after playing this for a number of games, in my last game, I knew where I could place that would satisfy other rules most effectively. And I was able to use that to my advantage to the point where I feel like by the end of the game, it was maybe like one or two turns before the end of the game that you actually got a handle on my rule in that particular game, because I knew how to give away the wrong answer with still a very truthful placement. And I love that. This is such a rich vein of deduction and learning the way that these different rules work together and the way that it blocks off sections of that terrain. It's so, so exciting. And maybe in a way, it's good that it doesn't have more theme, I guess. I'll play devil's advocate for a second there, because you'd be thinking more about that particular cryptid. Maybe?
They
I don't know.
They could have made up cryptids, though.
Very true. I don't know.
I mean, in case you didn't know, cryptids are probably not real.
Well, they aren't officially real.
I said probably.
Okay.
But, like, they could have created anything. Like, I don't know what that eel thing was. The closest I can guess is it was supposed to be the Loch Ness Monster, but it definitely isn't. It looks like the eels from The Little Mermaid in the Disney version. Yeah. But it is... They could have created anything. I'm not saying that it would have colored the game too much to have some theme. They really should have put some theme on it. But what they have created is really fun, and you really have to think about what you're giving away with every placement and even with every question. Because if I'm trying to figure out if you have a specific color of terrain as your clue, I have a whole board to ask about it. I don't need to ask specifically about the space that I'm considering being the one where I'm making a final guess. Maybe I want to ask about something that completely doesn't fulfill my own clue, so that I'm not giving away information to everybody else. Like, if I'm asking about something and you think that it fulfills my clue, and it's completely out of my region, maybe I'm not, formally giving you information, but I'm misleading you a little bit with what I'm asking.
Yeah.
Or you can ask about a space that narrows down the possibilities for which... Or you can ask about a space which narrows down the possibilities for which clue it would answer about. Like, if you ask about a mountain that happens to be adjacent to water, you're getting less information because it could either be a clue about the mountains or a clue about the water.
Right.
Whereas if you ask about a mountain space that's completely surrounded by mountains, you're going to get information about mountains unless there's, a hunting territory next to it. You can pick the space that gives you exactly which bits of information you want.
Yeah. So let's talk about the basic game versus the advanced game. In the advanced game, we add in the negated rules, not within 3 of a stone structure for something example like that. We played with the advanced game in our very last game, and I actually found it easier to put the rules together. And I think what happened in that particular circumstance is that I had a negative clue. I had not within 3 of blue or something like that, or not within 3 of one of the kinds of structures. And you had... I figured out pretty quickly, had to be near cougar territory. And the way that particular map was set up, it really, within seconds, gave me a Venn diagram of spaces that was maybe 10 spaces total out of the 100 or 120 or something on the board. And then all I had to do was figure out one more rule to get of it. And I don't know if that was a condition of the fact that I had a negative and you had a positive, because I feel like that never happened in one of our basic games where everybody had a positive clue. Do you think that that is the kind of thing that could have happened because we had yes and no clues? Or was it just that particular setup had 2 things that worked really well together like that?
I mean, I have a feeling it is partially because you had a negative clue, period, end of sentence.
Yeah.
If you're already thinking in the negative, it's a lot easier to process in the negative. Whereas if you've played a couple of games of this and you've only been working in positive clues,
okay,
and you get a positive clue, it's a little bit harder to switch your brain when you're looking at other people's placements to think about negative clues because you have no experience thinking about negative clues. Now, again, if you played a bunch of advanced games, I'm sure that would go away. But I think it might have just been the... my clue in that game was very obvious. It was around cougar territory. The cougar territory was in a very defined central zone. None of it was on the edges. And you got my clue very early, and I think that helped you. I had a lot easier time picking out the clues in the entirely positive game, but I'm not necessarily sure that means the game is a ton harder.
Yeah.
It certainly adds more options, not only adding in negative clues, but adding in that 4th set of structures. But I have a feeling if you can figure out at least one clue, you're going to be in a fairly similar position where...
Okay.
Because, I mean, the best feeling in this game is going around after you've won the game and telling everybody what their clues is.
Yes.
That is the best feeling. Because you feel so smart. And you're not any more or less smart than anybody else playing the game, but you figured it out.
Yeah.
And you feel real good about that. I think in the advanced game, there were a lot more shot in the dark guesses than there were in the positive game, because you really do need to work with double the amount of clues and narrow it down.
Yeah.
You're still getting the same types of information. If somebody places on a specific terrain, you're still learning about whether or not it can be a terrain clue. But there is so much more, especially with those not on, water or desert. Those were the ones that just threw me, because it can be on any of the 4 other types of terrain, and that
creates a big space.
It does, and I was focusing on thinking people were going to have clues like that, but I think a lot of the negative clues, because you're not just getting random clues, these are clues that are built to leave only one space. I have a feeling if you went through, the negative clues would be a lot more specific. They would be a lot more structure related.
Yeah.
As opposed to just on desert or water, or one from water. Because not within one of desert leaves most of the board open.
So to pivot to talk about player count, I played this at 3, 4, and 5, and I think you played at 4 and 5, right?
I played it at 4 and 5.
Okay. One thing that I noticed at 3 players, and I don't know if this was because 3-player was our first game, or if it was specifically because it was a 3-player game, is that we ran out of tokens in the 3-player game. I'm thinking, and this is something that I've heard other people talking about, I'm thinking a lot of that could be that with 3 players that are new, you don't know the way that the clues are going to work together yet. But I think at the same time, with 3 players, you've got a lot more ground to cover, and therefore you're going to be using those cubes a lot more. It does say in the book that if you run out of cubes, use one of the other player colors, and we never came close in a 5-player game to running out of cubes. I think maybe a 4-player we kind of got there a little bit, but I am a little surprised to see that, and I might just pick up extra cubes of the same color at some point to just have. Because I would like to play this at 3. I think it was still an enriching experience at 3. Did you feel any difference between 4 and 5 players?
No, not really. They both felt like I was getting enough information that I could find things out on every turn, and I was never, like, stretching to try to find information.
Yeah.
Speaking of the player pieces, though, there is a little bit of a color discrepancy because you do not choose your player color in this game. Once you do the setup card, you flip over the card and it tells you the first player is
Alpha book
red. It is alpha red, yeah. And then you go through, and if you have 3 players, it may say the first player is red, the second player is green, the third player is purple. Or it may be, in a 5-player game, all of the colors will be used. But you're not picking a specific color. So, if you play 2 games back-to-back, remember that you are now a different color. Which is a problem I had in some of our multiple play sessions where I was just like, I'm not purple anymore. I'm blue. There's also a little bit of a color discrepancy. Like the cubes are definitely teal.
Yeah.
They're closer to a blue than a green.
The green and the blue are very close together in color, and I'm sure that this is a big issue for color blindness.
I mean, it's a big issue for not colorblindness, because the green player very often didn't know which cubes were theirs when they were picking their stuff up. Yeah. So that was a little bit of an issue.
I think more than anything else, like, I might replace the entire green set of people if I can find the, discs and cubes I need, because the book is green, and the other book is blue, but the green player tokens are definitely almost blue. And
the blue ones are a completely different shade of blue, so you wouldn't necessarily, like, one is a baby blue and one is like a rich dark blue.
Yeah.
I'm not sure why they don't, like, I mean, I guess the answer is because it costs more money, but you could have easily marked them with the Greek letter that's on the book.
Yeah, and that would be an added cost, either a sheet of stickers that everybody would scream about, or the pressing or something like that. I mean, maybe I'll do that. Maybe I'll just mark them better. Something like that. I don't know. I'm continuing to come up with ideas and, ways to tweak this because I've enjoyed playing it so much.
Yeah, this is definitely one we're going to be hanging on to.
It's like the way, even to bring it back to talking about Terraforming Mars, why so many people bling out their Terraforming Mars, because it's such a good game. You want to have better quality components and stuff like that. And I feel like Cryptid is 1 or 2 component or production steps away from being the greatest deduction game that I play. Yes?
The thing, like, I'm just sorry that I went back to the theme, and the thing that jumps to mind with me is, and we haven't talked about this game yet, but I know we are going to be in an upcoming episode, Spell Smashers.
Okay.
Is a game where you sort of layer cards on top of each other to create a fully realized monster. If they had just, like, the Bigfoot card, and then you put your setup card on top of the Bigfoot card, and now we're hunting Bigfoot.
Okay.
That way you don't, like, you could hunt whatever monster you wanted, and it wouldn't necessarily have to go with the thing, and it would just create a thing. Okay, I don't, this is not...
No, I mean, that's a good point. Like, there's a number of ways that could be moved forward on this, and maybe if the game does well, which it should, because it's a very fun game to play...
It's very good.
Maybe they'll do a revised edition. Maybe they'll offer, an upgrade or an expansion pack. Oh man, I want expansions for this somehow. There's so much excitement in figuring out the way that the rules work, and then getting that rush of joy that you talk about at the end of the game, when you get to tell everybody what their rules are, that I want more with this game. I want to do more, I want to learn more, and I want to continue playing this game for a long time. So, last thing to talk about, and I feel like this can even kind of become our final thoughts. Who is this game for, and who is this game not for? Because I feel like more than most games we talk about, there are people that will never want to play this game, and there are people that will absolutely love this game.
Okay, straight off the bat, if you don't like a puzzle and you don't like deduction, this game is not for you. When I was doing the show notes today, when we do the show notes, we always have that little thing at the end. This is a game of,
Blank and
tile
blank and blank.
placement and there's always 3 things in the little rubric for that. And I was like, deduction and misdirection and deduction. That's all there is here. I mean, that's what this game is about. So if you don't like deduction, don't play this game. That's very obvious to me. I have a feeling that if you're one of those people where you get into a puzzle and your brain locks up, this is going to be a very frustrating game.
Yeah.
You need to be able to be malleable with what you think you know about other people as you gain new information and process that into your system. If that's fun for you, this will be good. If that is not fun for you, keep moving.
I think Cryptid is for the person who wants to feel the tumblers in the lock of your mind getting into place. There have been so many times playing this game where I've been like trying to just jam that key into the lock, and I'm thinking about it. I'm like, oh, why doesn't this work? Why doesn't that space work? And I've had a number of times where I've chosen the space and I'm like, this is it. And then it gets to 4 people and the 5th person places a cube, and I'm just like, what in the world? But then when I do get that final piece and it slides into place, Cryptid feels like nothing else in terms of deduction. So this is a permanent game bag for me.
I will say,
Yeah?
if you normally play games in a loud place or you have distractions, this may be one you want to save for your quieter game nights, because when we were playing this at Gen Con, I remember, like, we talked about, one of the people playing messed up their rule, and it's fun to make fun, but, like, it very well could have been any of us, because I was so distracted on that Gen Con floor just trying to make sure I wasn't in somebody's way, and listening to all the stuff going on around me, just sort of generally being aware of that many people around me. Like, you need to be able to focus to figure out what people's roles are, and if you're not playing games in a space where you can focus, you're not going to have a fun time playing this. You're just going to get frustrated.
I will say, though, this game worked fantastically at Salud Cerveceria, and it will be there the next time we have a game night.
Nice.
All right, well, that kind of wraps it up for Cryptid, except for what we do at this point.
We had theme.
Let's go to the break and talk about some beers to pair it up with. For more information on the beers we chose to pair with today's game on tap, check out the show notes section at our website, draftmechanic.net. All right, we are putting Cryptid on tap. Cryptid, the 2018 release from Osprey Games, 3 to 5 players, 30 to 50 minutes, designed by Hal Duncan and Ruth Vevers, with art by Kwanchai Moria. And in case you did not know, cryptozoology, which is where cryptids come from, is a pseudoscience and subculture that aims to prove the existence of entities from the folklore records, such as Bigfoot, the Chupacabra, or the complicated word. Cryptozoologists refer to these entities as cryptids, a term coined by the subculture. And that is the Wikipedia entry for cryptozoology. Should we talk about some beer?
We should.
All right, first up, Coppertail Brewing Company in Tampa, Florida, has Cryptid Imperial Stout. That's pretty easy name one there, right there. 12.7% ABV. Ooh, that is a big boy. Imperial Stout with rich, roasty malts. This is seasonally available January through March on draft and bottles. Probably like 750 milliliter bomber-ish bottles.
They looked like 750 in the photos that I could see. The website did not provide the bottle size, but they looked like 750s in the pictures.
They also appeared to variant the hell out of this, with Untappd listing 14 non-basic variants. Some obviously in very small batches, but pistachio and Neapolitan sound really good.
Yeah, they had every kind of barrel aging you could possibly want. And just from the numbers of people who had them, I have a feeling that they are taproom-only releases, just like one-off things. But as people tend to do with Imperial Stouts, they make them taste like all kinds of things because they take those flavors so well.
Mm-hmm.
Next up from Sierra Nevada Brewing in Chico, California, we have one of the 2 beers on this list which immediately jumped to mind for me when I started thinking about cryptid beers. Like, this is one of the beers that if you say to a craft beer person, oh, name a beer that's named after a cryptid, there are 2 that people will probably come up with. The first one is Bigfoot from Sierra Nevada, which is an American barley wine. It is 9.6% ABV and 90 IBU. It is an intense beer with bittersweet malts and whole cone hops. It's able to be aged and developed, and it's great for verticals.
Truth.
Sierra Nevada does a couple of these really big beers that are really great to save and open up and share with a big group of people. Just try, like, the 2009 version tastes like this now, and the 2010 version tastes like this. And because they are such big beers and they develop almost like wine would develop, and we've talked about aging beer before, but Bigfoot is one of those beers that is just absolutely perfect for this. It is available yearly. Was first brewed back in 1983, so that's the other reason it's great for verticals, because they've been doing it forever. And it is bottle released in January, so keep an eye out for this. We're going to be talking a lot about January seasonals in this beer, because people name big, like, complex beers after weird giant beasts. So this is another January release.
All right, from Greenbrier Valley Brewing Company in Maxwellton, West Virginia, we have the Mothman Black IPA, a Cascadian dark ale, 6.7% ABV and 71 IBU. This is a black IPA brewed with Pacific Northwest Amarillo and Chinook hops. Malts bring a dark color and toffee and chocolate flavors. It's available in cans, bottles, and on draft. Pretty much any shape you need your beer to be in.
Spherical.
No, we are not doing
Cans are
beer
round,
pouch.
but they're not spherical. All right. Next, from Cricket Hill Brewing Company in Fairfield, New Jersey, we have Jersey Devil Imperial Red Ale. This is an Imperial Red Ale that is 7.4% and 67 IBU. It is brewed with Centennial and Zythos hops, and it is available September through December in bottles and on draft. It is their fall/winter seasonal. Cricket Hill is a brewery that is near and dear to my heart. I know we've talked about our beer history 6-packs at some point in the past, but Cricket Hill is like the first craft brewery that I ever regularly visited. It was where my friends and I went on Friday night, and it was like really my induction into the entire community of craft beer. So I was very happy to be able to put their Jersey Devil Imperial Red on this list.
Great Divide Brewing Company in Denver, Colorado has the other one that always springs to mind in this kind of list. It is Yeti, the American Imperial Stout, 9.5% ABV, 75 IBU. This is the big roasty stout with caramel and toffee notes with tons of hops. This is available year-round in bottles and cans, and it also has a year-round seasonal variant calendar. January through April, you can get the chocolate oak-aged version. May through August, you get the vanilla oak-aged version. September through December, the chai version, and then barrel-aged in November and December. That's some good variants.
Yeah, Great Divide Yeti is another one, like you said, that is just, it immediately jumped to mind. It is a huge beer, and it is very good to try every year. This is not one I would necessarily age, but every year I want to try what the new Yeti tastes like.
Now, what would a list of cryptid beers be without something mythical and probably very difficult to prove the existence of? Danielle?
From American Solera in Tulsa, Oklahoma, we have Cryptozoology, which is a Flanders Oud Bruin that comes in at 7% ABV. They took the Ground is Shaking sour brown ale and aged it in blue corn whiskey barrels. Here's the thing, they only made 30 gallons of the stuff, and they say that made 240 bottles, so obviously this is a little time sensitive, but if you are looking for it, people are still drinking it now. So if you wanted to get out there and find it, this would be obviously a great beer to pair with Cryptid, but it is going to be very hard to find, and the window to get it is very small. So, like a Cryptid, you're going to have to hunt for this one if you'd like to get it. I think you will definitely have to be in Oklahoma to find it, but if you do find it, it's like a bottle that's got this label that looks like it's handwritten Cryptozoology on it, white label, reddish writing. It is very tasty sounding, so if you're in Oklahoma, give it a look.
You might know somebody who knows somebody who knows somebody.
Who is Bigfoot.
Who is Bigfoot. You might also know Bigfoot yourself. I don't know, maybe he's a friend of a listener. It's entirely possible. A lot of mythical creatures out there in the world.
I hope that drinking one of these beers along with your game of Cryptid, A, doesn't hinder your deduction too terribly much, because these are some big beers, but also brings a little bit of theme that the game might be perhaps sorely needing.
All right, well, if you want some more information on any of those beers, check out the show notes section at draftmechanic.net. Danielle will have links to all of those beers in the website. Danielle, we just had a little chance to do a little bit of journeying and exploring ourselves, and I feel like it's time for us to do a Beer Traveler segment, which is not something we've done in quite some time.
It's been a while.
No. So we had a chance to go and just took a quick vacation over to Seattle this last week. We had a chance to visit some of the great board game cafes out there. We went to both of the Mox Boarding House locations. We also swung by a spot in West Seattle that was Meeple's Games. Really just cool, hometown kind of game pub. They have food there. They had some drinks there. They had a little cafe. And had a really good games library selection as well.
Hang on to it for the final round.
Okay, fine. But what we did want to talk about is some of the breweries we had a chance to visit out in Seattle. If you are up in that area or traveling to that area, maybe you want to check some of these out. I know that Orcacon is up there. Obviously, PAX is up in that area. And if you're going to something like Shucks and you're flying in or out of Seattle, maybe some of these breweries will be along your way if you have a day before or after the convention.
I do kind of want to add a caveat. Previous beer travelers have been us giving like a definitive list of stuff we think is the best stuff that you can go to in a city. This is the stuff that we went to, and we'll talk about what we really liked at these locations. But we are by no means saying that these are the only breweries in Seattle and that these are the only places you should go if you're looking to get great beer out there.
Mm-hmm. So the first day that we had a chance to go poke around, we stopped at 2 breweries that were right around the corner for each other. And actually, there's a lot more breweries in this area that if you are in this particular part of Seattle and you're looking to make a day of it and just, take a lift or something from bar to bar and go back to your hotel, this is a good area to be doing so in.
The Ballard area? Is that what it was?
I think that's that name of that area. Anyway, we started at Reuben's Brews, and I wanted to talk about the Britannia Guava, which was their sour ale with, you got it, guava.
No way.
6.3% ABV, and I just really got a really nice, rich, fruity flavor off of this. And I love any kind of, a Brett Pale Ale, something like that, and this one did some really cool stuff with it.
Yeah, I mean, it was certainly a unique beer. I was not particularly fond of it. The Brett IPA is sort of hit or miss for me, and this one was a miss, but not because it's bad, just wasn't my flavor at the moment. Mm-hmm. I was really excited about their holiday goza. This is a cranberry and orange zest goza that also has spices in it. It comes in at 4.3% ABV, and it's just an absolutely beautiful, like a pinky red color, and it's just sour enough that it gives you that nice goza flavor, but it's not going to give you that pain in your jaw that you get from a really intense sour. I enjoyed it very much, and it looks like they can this as well.
Nice. Reuben's Brews, nice small size tap room. They had maybe 10 tables or so that can seat about 8 each, kind of picnic table style. And they had, I felt like, 16 to 20 beers on tap of their stuff, plus a few guest taps. There was definitely a heavy IPA and pale ales and hazy IPA hand, and you'll see that in a lot of, these breweries that have a ton of stuff. And it is definitely a trend that I saw a lot up in that Seattle area.
It's where hops are born.
Yeah, but what I will say about it is that if you go over to Reuben's and you're in the mood for an IPA, they have a lot of really great options, and there was a lot of really cool stuff on that menu. I wasn't particularly feeling IPAs at the moment, so I didn't indulge into like the 5 or 6 or 10 different IPAs that they had on. But if you're looking for that style of beer and want to try different kinds of hops, different kinds of brewing styles, if you want to know what separates a West Coast from an East Coast from a New England IPA, they had it all on there, so you had a chance to take a look at it.
They also had a couple of sours, not only the goza that I was talking about, but an additional goza. They had a couple of sort of funky, like you said, the Brett IPA. Mm-hmm. There were a couple of sour beers that they also had on, so there was a little bit of variety. I think they had maybe 1 or 2 dark beers out of the 20, so a little less of that than some other spices we'll talk about later, but it definitely was a nice variety of stuff.
So second up, we went around the corner to Stoop, and this is S-T-O-U-P, Stoop Brewing. And I had a beer called Aegir, A-E-G-I-R, which is their New England IPA, 6% ABV. Just real rich, juicy, a lot of kind of earthy notes to it as well. I just, enjoy it. And this was a collaboration. I don't remember who it was with. It wasn't somebody that I was familiar with, but it was a collaboration beer, and they're also canning it, so that's pretty cool. It
reminded me, I know we've probably talked about in the past, Hawkbill IPA from Burial, which is also that really, really juicy, almost creamy IPA. And it had a similar feel and taste to it as that. It was so citrusy, as opposed to something that just, some IPAs say, oh, we put Citra into the mix to bring tropical notes, or we put in hops that are going to bring that tropical fruit flavor. Like, this was an intensely fruity IPA. It wasn't sort of hinting at fruitiness.
Yeah. Stoop also had a really solid Citra hopped IPA. It was just pure Citra IPA. I really like it. Citra's my favorite hop flavor. It's really got that citrusy, orangey kind of fruitiness to it. And this one, relying just on that hop, really brought the profile of that particular hop to the forefront. So I really enjoyed that. Other things to say about Stoop, kind of a similar vibe. They was honestly kind of packed by the time we got over there. They got the big garage door open. Both times that I've been to Stoop, they've had a food truck outside, so I don't know if they just have permanent food trucks at their place, or if it's they just happen to show up.
They had a schedule up.
Okay, I've been there twice in 3.5 years, so I thought that the odds were pretty good that they have a food truck all the time. A very scientific sample that I've taken there. They do have an upstairs area that's available some nights of the week. It's not always open, but there's enough space on the downstairs that you can kind of hang out and poke around. They also had the most ridiculously weird vending machine that I've ever seen, and it is a vending machine that just basically sells packaged meats and cheeses.
The good stuff.
The good stuff. Yeah, there was one that was just looked like chunks of sausage and different kinds of cheese, and it was just labeled the good stuff.
Fun fact, when you vacuum pack cheese, it doesn't look like the good stuff.
This was a refrigerated vending machine, so you can be sure that they were probably safe.
The beer that I had that I wanted to highlight from Stoop is called the Funky Cold Bordello. This was a rustic breaded farmhouse ale that was aged for 12 months in Bordeaux wine barrels. It was nice and funky and tart, and it had just enough tannin, and it was really, really good. Like I said, I was sort of in a sour mood that day, so this really hit the mark for me. It was really tasty, but I did really enjoy the Ager that Jake talked about earlier. It was very good.
So day 2, we swung over to the Fremont neighborhood and unsurprisingly went to Fremont Brewing.
No way.
And we are actually talking about the same beer here because it's so dang good. So the 2018 edition of Dark Star, which is their bourbon barrel-aged imperial stout, just got released a few days beforehand. It's 13.6%, and we happened to be lucky enough to be there when they still had some of the variants. They had a coffee version of the bourbon barrel-aged, and they also had a version they called Spice Wars, which is holiday spiced and all sorts of fun spices. Again, bourbon barrel-aged version of the stout. We particularly really loved the Spice Wars, so much that we were able to get a bottle home, and oh boy, I'm excited to drink some more of that in the future.
Yeah, I mean, imperial stouts, especially barrel-aged imperial stouts, take strong spices so well. I mean, some of my favorite beer ever is Mexican Brunch from Cane Brewing, and this had a lot of those same really warm, spicy flavors. I mean, we were sitting outside on kind of a gray day that was... It would not have felt super warm to be sitting there, but just drinking that beer, it had all the nice roasty flavors from the imperial stout and the warmth of the spices coming through in a fairly strong way, not overwhelmingly so, but like you weren't searching for the spices in the spiced variant. It was so good.
Yeah, Fremont has a good wide range of beers as well. That's one thing that I was really appreciative of. We talked about Stoop and Reuben's Brews. Both of them really definitely aimed towards the IPAs, the pale ales. They had a few sours and a few other interesting things in there as well. But I felt Fremont was the first one that had a really wide range of stuff. They had a very strong, I think it was a Kolsch we had.
Their Kolsch was so good. We actually got the Kolsch in the flight, and we were using the Kolsch as sort of like a nice palate break. So we drank a little bit of this really strong coffee beer, take a break, take a couple of drinks of this really nice, refreshing Kolsch.
Yeah.
And then you can go back to something like the Spiced Wars or go to just the straight barrel-aged version. But it was such just a nice, clean, mild beer. The flavor was just really, really good.
Yeah, they had a lot of good classic styles as well, but they weren't just swinging for the fences in those two directions. They had a good range of IPAs, including some single hop, fresh hop, and some wet hop IPAs. So, focusing on those particular styles to show you a little bit about, what this hop or what this kind of brewing technique does. So if you're looking for a wide variety, I think Fremont is a perfect place to start. It's also got a great space. They've got the pretzels, free pretzels and some fruit. You can grab some fruit. Plenty of seating inside and outside. So if it's a great day, they've got a nice front patio. And they look like they've got enough space to do some events. I'm sure they do bands or something there as well.
They're right by the water, so you can look at the marina. They're close enough to, obviously, the Fremont neighborhood, but also to, Gasworks Park and all that. It was a great area that if you're looking for a spot to go, that you're not going to just be in a sort of an industrial park with breweries, which is sort of what that area by Rubens and Stoop was, then Fremont is going to be more what you're looking for.
And then, if you follow the train tracks a little bit further down, you find my favorite brewery in Seattle, which is Holy Mountain Brewing Company. This is a brewery that I went to when I went on my West Coast trip, before this podcast even started. My dad and I drove from San Diego to Seattle. And I remember just having, really nice brewery stops all the way. And Holy Mountain was, I think, the very last brewery that I went to. And something about that particular location and just the beer that I had there made the entire kind of trip, everything was judged in relation to that at that point. Holy Mountain does such awesome stuff that fits my palate so well. I know it's not going to fit everybody's palate, but I have been waiting a long time to get back there, and I'm so glad I got a chance to take you with me. The tap room
Me too.
is a really stark white. You know, they got white subway tile, white walls. It's a very metal-oriented thing. When I was there a few years ago, it was all drone metal, and this was more of your typical metal kind of sound. But nice people, great beer, and I want to talk about the beer that I've been wanting to talk about for 4 years, and that is King's Head Bourbon Barrel Aged Double Oat Brown. 9% ABV. This beer is not thick and soupy, but I just felt it was very rich. You know, it's not as heavy as an Imperial Stout. You won't get that kind of soy sauce or that kind of thick mouthfeel. It won't stay on your tongue forever, but it'll stay long enough for you to get the flavors of that. You get the oatmeal, you get the roasted malts, you get the barrel a whole lot, and then you get that booze on there as well, because it is bourbon barrel aged and it is a high ABV kind of beer. This is the kind of beer that I've been waiting years to get another drink of, and it's one of their normal offerings. Like, honestly, we've had a keg here in Charlotte. It made it out to Salud because for some freaking reason we can get Holy Mountain in North Carolina, literally across the country, so I'm happy about that. But I love this beer. It's a fantastic beer, and if you are in that area, I highly encourage you go by Holy Mountain and check it out.
I told Jake that I got to pick 2 beers because I said so on this one. I really enjoyed their Little Donker, which was a Session Belgian Double that comes in at 5% ABV. I'm not going to look into whether or not a Session Belgian Double can even really be a thing by traditional Belgian style laws. Usually, 5% is fairly low in alcohol for a Belgian Double, so it does make sense that that's what you would call it, because a session beer is a lower ABV beer that you can drink a little bit easily. But this was so good. It had all of the really nice, really rich flavors of a double, but it did feel a little bit easier on the drinker to have this nice session-style double. And just from looking at people drinking this, it doesn't look like it gets pretty wide distribution. It's a fairly localized to their taproom thing. So I said, I'm going to pick another one that people can have if they're not in the Seattle taproom.
Yes.
So I want to talk about their Sunroom, which is bottled and distributed, and it is a mixed culture saison that they aged in oak barrels, and it is 5.5% ABV, and it's just so very good. At this point, like, when I just see mixed culture saison aged in barrels, I'm like, okay, that could go any number of different ways. And I ordered this and I was like, oh, I just want to try it. It could be great, it could be nothing. And it was so good. So if you happen to see bottles of the Sunroom distributed, give it a try. This is a good one, because I know just saying mixed culture saison with barrel aging can be a toss-up.
Holy Mountain to me is another burial kind of brewery.
Well, I mean, they had a burial collab on when we were there, so...
But, like, you get those breweries that they don't follow an IPA trend particularly. They don't follow the, Imperial Stout trend particularly. But they do the things that they want to do, and they produce these really interesting ideas. And obviously, Burial has grown a lot in the last 5 or 6 years. For those of you coming in, we're big fans of Burial Beer Company in Asheville, North Carolina, right up, quote-unquote, up the block from us. An hour and 2 hours or so away. But Holy Mountain makes me feel at home the way I feel at Burial, because I feel like no matter what beer I get, no matter what style it is, I'm going to get something that's really exciting and interesting, or at least comforting, or have a really good flavor to it. And I just like their aesthetic, and I like the whole thought of being there.
Okay.
Unsurprisingly, they've done a good number of collaborations, which when I was there 3.5 years ago, they'd never even met. And I just, it's so cool to come back, and it's like, oh, my breweries are friends now. This is so nice. By the way, if you're coming to Burn Pile, Burial Beer Festival in Asheville, there will be some Holy Mountain.
I believe the bartender said there will likely be some Sunroom there.
Yes. And our next brewery will also be in attendance.
Oh, really?
Uh-huh. The next day, we had a chance to pop into a downtown Seattle brewery. This is right by Pike Place Market in Seattle, which was a crazy place to find a brewery. But it's just in the downtown space. You kind of walk into this rolled-up garage door, and you were at Cloudburst Brewing. I had a number of different things. I had one that was an apricot wheat that was okay, pretty good stuff. And I also had their Been a Minute IPA, which is their good old classic hazy IPA. 6.8% ABV, and it is your typical hazy, cloudy IPA. I really liked it. It's, a perfect example of the style. I don't really have to say a whole lot more about that. If you like IPAs, there's a good quality IPA there.
I had their Lake Sunshine, which is a gin barrel-aged Pilsner. This is 6.5% ABV, and imagine gin and Pilsner and put them together, and that's what this was. I mean, there's not a lot of sort of subtlety in the idea of a gin barrel-aged Pilsner. A Pilsner is a nice, clean beer that tastes like what most people think of when they think beer. And this had it paired very well with the gin barrel aging. I liked it quite a lot. And it was certainly the more out there of the two things that I had. I also had their Dry Irish Stout, which they had on Nitro. Dry Irish Stout is one of my favorites, and I don't find it as frequently as I would love to find it. So that was, like you were saying, that you had the hazy IPA, and it was a good representation of the style, if not outstanding. This was the same with their Dry Irish Stout. It was a really good representation of a Dry Irish Stout. If it didn't knock my socks off, that's fine. It was a really good Dry Irish Stout, and there's not enough of them out there.
Yeah. Cool. Well, those are 5 breweries that we went to in Seattle. Danielle's going to put links to those in the show notes because she's a wizard at show noting. And, yeah, if you have any other Seattle breweries, I'd love to hear about them. And maybe on a future trip someday, we'll go by them. But, if you want to jump in either on the Guild or on the Slack and just talk about some great local breweries you found while traveling, I'd love to hear about them.
Speaking of the Slack, let's get to the final round.
Speaking of that. Want a second opinion on some of the games we talked about on this episode? Check out some other great content creators at punchboardmedia.com. All right, dear listeners, it is time for the final round where we ask our Slack to contribute on a question of my choosing, I guess.
You chose one this week.
I did choose one. Thank you so much for not beating me up about forgetting to do one until the last minute last time. But anyway, if you would like to jump in, draftmechanic.net/Slack is where you can sign up, or just go to the website and click around until you find your way in. We'd love to have you in there, talk about beer, talk about board games, talk about this particular topic. I stated, after a great experience at Meeple's Games in West Seattle, I got to thinking about all the great FLGSs that I've come across in my travels. And now, channel, I'd love to hear your stories of awesome FLGSs that you found away from home that made you feel welcome again. So to preface that, I guess we should go back to that story we were telling that I put in the wrong place. We went to some games places. We went to both locations of Mox Boarding House, which is very nice. It's very... they got a great selection of stuff. They got a decent library. They've got nice cafes at both locations.
Helpful folks.
But it does definitely feel like a production. It is the quote-unquote game store. They are friendly. They are there, and they are local. But when we went into Meeple's Games, it was upstairs in kind of a little office park kind of area.
Strip mall. We call it a strip mall.
Yeah, okay. But it was upstairs there, and we walk in, and it felt like a home game store. You got crowded shelves, you've got a crowded library shelf, you got a whole bunch of people in the back that are 2 different groups of people playing Gloomhaven, starting at 8 o'clock, because, oh dear.
Because they don't respect the closing time of the store.
And we walked in, and we got, immediate, real nice greeting, a friendly greeting from the lady we found out was the owner. And she's just, we've been here 4 or 5 years, just, continuing to grow the community here. And I just felt so, at home in this store that I had only been in for 5 to 10 minutes. And we just got to talking and talked with the lady for a good 20 minutes or so about games and this new game or this new game. Have you heard of this thing? So on and so forth. And it was such a relaxing, awesome experience. That is the kind of thing I always hope that I have when I go into game stores on the road. I travel a good bit, and I hate to say it, but an experience like that is rarer than I expected it to be. So I wanted to ask everybody, what were some of the best FLGS experiences they've had on the road? So we'll kick it off with BJ from Board Game Gumbo. He says, we've had awesome experiences at Top Tier in Hattiesburg, Mississippi. Knowledgeable owners, amazing stock, very friendly prices, plenty of well-lit tables, and southern hospitality every time we have visited. This store is located near an amazing river with waterfalls to kayak, so it makes for an incredible two-fur experience every time we go.
Don't bring your board games on a kayak.
No, I mean, maybe no, I am drawing a blank as to a water-safe board game. Do you have any?
Hive?
Hive, okay. Hive. That's the one.
D. Shannon Berry said, "This is 100% Labyrinth Games in DC. I can always count on welcoming, knowledgeable staff eager to show me games and even help me pick something out for my kids before I was game literate. The first game I ever bought for myself was from there. Flux. Don't judge me.
I won't.
And I overcame my social anxiety to play Adventure League for the first time there as well.
Oh, cool.
Labyrinth Games showed me why the F is an FLGS, in a time when my local store was less than welcoming."
You know, as many times as we've been through the DC metro area, we've never been to Labyrinth. I kind of want to see if we can make that happen over the holidays at some point.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to be right up there.
Yeah. Megan Naxer says, huge fan of Fun Again Games out in Eugene, Oregon, one of 2 brick-and-mortar stores. Huge library, free-to-play in-store, lots of friendly faces, great retail selection also. Is that why she moved back there? I think that's why she moved back there.
I don't think that's why she moved back there.
I'm sure she is not sad to be near Eugene, I'm sure she is not sad to be near Fun Again Games again.
No. Dennis said, I love Cat and Mouse in Chicago. I was there when they first opened, have my one and only game store t-shirt from there, and spent a few nights having a beer and playing games with Andre. They helped me keep my sanity, and I was living away from home, spending my weeks in Chicago. Miss you guys. Catandmouse.com.
Cat-N-Mouse.
I was just going to put a link in the show notes, but okay.
You are very good at show notes. All right, and as is tradition, Patrick Hillier gets the final word in the final round. He says, I don't play much at FLGSs when I travel, but I make an effort to check them out to support brick-and-mortar stores. Hear, hear. Agree with what everyone says about Labyrinth. The most unusual find was Game Masters near Pittsburgh. The clerk gave us a tour, even though we later learned he was blind, and they had a fun stash of used old games. Diversions in Portland, Maine has always been welcoming and has fun finds. Vault of Midnight in Ann Arbor is a recent find in a quaint downtown, and they invited me to play later, but I had to run. Guard Tower in Columbus, Ohio has a friendly store cat. I'm sure I could go on. We just had KitchCon at Beyond Board in Columbus, Ohio. Old games all day. Nice that they had us there. I always just love reading Patrick's stories because he's got like the coolest, most comforting answers to all of these questions.
His answer had a cat in it.
His answer had a cat in it and all these cool places.
You've been to Vault of Midnight, right?
I have. A Vault of Midnight, definitely super cool spot in Ann Arbor and one that I highly recommend. All right. I think that kind of brings us to the end of this episode of Draft Mechanic. As always, draftmechanic.net, your one-stop shop for your Draft Mechanic needs. Draft Mechanic at Draft Mechanic on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram are the places you can go for that. You can send us an email, draftmechanic@gmail.com.
We have a Board Game Geek Guild that is guild number 2470, so you can go over there and let us know what you think about the stuff we talked about this episode. If you happen to be in the Charlotte, North Carolina area, once again, our next meetup is going to be on Thursday, November 1st at Good Road Cider Works, and then the next Tuesday meetup is Tuesday, November 20th at Salute Cerveceria.
Oh, by the way, Draft Mechanic is sponsored by Gray Fox Games. Visit grayfoxgames.com and sign up for their newsletter for the latest. Gray Fox Games, quality games, cleverly crafted. There it is. We've done it. I think we've done everything, right?
No. As always, I would like to remind our listeners to please game responsibly and tell them that I'll see them back here in 2 weeks for another round.
All right. Good night.
Night.
Draft Mechanic episode 87 was recorded on Sunday, October 28th, 2018 in front of a live and very sleepy Studio Cat.
Beauty is in your eyes, you are the beholder. You render me stricken. Do not go gently into that gutter line.
Hey out there in podcast land, this is Brian and I just wanted to invite you to check out my tabletop game review and preview video channel, Cloak and Maple. There, I check out a lot of Kickstarter games as well as sneak in some fresh reviews of published games. Come and check out all of the bad acting in my attempts to be entertaining in my intros. Stay for a game overview and hear my thoughts of the game at the very end. You can find Cloak and Maple on YouTube at youtube.com/cloakandmaple.
Punchboard Media.
Where we all
Bring something
to the table.
Pull up a chair at punchboardmedia.com.